Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez, and today I'm going to talk about a video I saw, and some of you who are in martial arts probably saw it recently too. And that's a video that showed a gentleman teaching a child martial arts in China. It was part of a documentary they did, and you really don't know what they're saying, but what you can see is how they were training this child who was maybe 7 years old, if that. And if you saw the video, you may have been appalled like I was, where you see this grown grown man slapping this child around. Now, what's also appalling is a lot of people's comments about this. Now, there are some people who said, "Oh, that's the way training should be done, and we should be incorporating that in the U.S." And actually, someone said, "Well, if you look at the athletes that are coming out of China, they're the great athletes, and so we should be taking their response." Now, let's be honest. I'm not saying this for political reasons. I'm just saying what is. China is a totalitarian government. And whenever you have a totalitarian government, the government can do whatever they want to their people. It's just the way it works. Now, some people say, well, I'm criticizing one group of people for the way they do stuff, and I shouldn't do it. The truth is, there are cultures that are better than others. And the way you can tell is how they treat their children. Now, as people are looking at this, anyone who's had any education in how people should be trained, the brain, the pretty much children's childhood development, they would say this is completely pointless. It's just it's brutality for the sake of brutality. And there's evidence behind that. If you actually talk to people who in exercise nutritional science, they'll tell you that doesn't work. Now, a lot of people will say, yeah, but look, China has these 12-year-olds who go to the Olympics. And that's one thing that I would say is, yes, they have 12-year-olds that go to the Olympics, but why aren't they back when they're 14? Why aren't they back at 15? And the other thing that I would actually tell people is look at if China's way works. Let's just take two countries. We'll take the U.S., where I'm living in right now, and we'll take China's. And we'll take a sport that is traditionally been seen as a sport that China really does push their children to go into. We'll do gymnastics. Now, if we look at the medals won, U.S. actually won 12 medals for gymnastics in the Olympics, while China, total medals they won for gymnastics were 5. In essence, the U.S. actually doubled their medal earnings than China. So right away, you should be saying, wait, hold on a minute. Why is it if China is taking these kids at a really young age, taking them away from their parents, and training them as hard as they can push them, sometimes breaking bones? Why is it they actually have less than the amount of medals that the U.S. has? Well, before we even actually talk about that, we really should talk about the population. Now, one of the fun things is if we look at the population of China in 2016, it was just under 1.4 billion. That's billion with a B. While the U.S. was only at 324 million. So we have a larger population in China. We have more strenuous physical training exercises in China. We have more training. We have children becoming professionals, and yet they're failing. I'll let that sink in. Pretty much, they're taking the kids, they're pushing them as far as they can, they're destroying their lives and stealing their childhood. And yet, when you look at it, they're actually below what the U.S. is doing, where taking a kid from his family and training him like that is considered child abuse. And I'm pretty sure most parents, if they see their kid being slapped around by a coach in the U.S., they wouldn't stand for it. So, if this type of training works, why isn't China winning every event the way you would expect to be, especially with such a bigger population? Now, the answer is simple. That training does not work. And we have a lot of evidence showing that. Now, I did talk a little bit about before how the skeletal system in children are not mature enough. And so sometimes by overusing, by pushing the child to do certain things, you actually are causing damage to the skeletal system. And if you do damage to the skeletal system, it will not be able to maintain weight later on in life. Now, one of the things that is actually interesting is if you look at some of these these people who have gone through these really austere programs as children, and look at them when they're 50, 60 years old, you'll notice that a lot of them have really interesting ways that they walk. And what that's really telling you is, for some reason, they're walking. A lot of these people who have done these programs in areas like China and the old Soviet Union, their bodies are shot before they even reach an age that you would expect that. I mean, if you look around, if you Google, you'll see some of these old men, these men who aren't really that old. You'll see these 60 or 50, you'll see 50-year-olds walking with the same gait and walking with them as someone in their 80s. That right there tells you that this training wasn't good back then. Now, the reason this happens is bone density, I mentioned it before, grows over time. And when you hit puberty, it actually starts getting stronger. It starts getting more dense, more able to do these things. Now, if you're pushing the body and breaking it, some people say, oh, look, but at 12, they're able to compete with adults. But they can compete against adults, but they still end up losing. And what ends up happening is they have a window. And once that window's over, their bodies are so shot that they cannot continue to go. In the U.S., if you look at one of the main gold medalists, if we look at this modern Olympics and we look at someone like Simone Biles, I hope I said her name right, we find that she is not a little girl who's 12 years old who was being pushed to compete against adults. When she competed against adults, she was 17 or 18 years old, and she's the one who actually won all the medals. Now, the nice thing that you actually see with her is she actually doesn't carry all the injuries that the 12-year-olds from China do. In essence, she could potentially compete the next Olympics and win even more medals, and she probably will. Now, that being said, what we're talking about different types of training. If you're training correctly, you can actually build up and continue for the rest of your life. If you're training hard and too rough, well, you don't have a future in training. Your training will go to a certain point and end. And if you think about it, when you're looking at these, anytime you see these training regimens where they take children and abuse them, know that yes, they might be able to become the best gymnasts or best martial artists for a year or two until the body gives up on them. Well, if you train correctly, if you actually use the science that people who have strength training degrees or exercise nutritional science degrees can tell you, they can actually prolong the amount of training. And so you end up having people who last longer and are able to do more amazing stuff. You think about this. If you started someone at doing any activity at 5 and they reach their peak at 12, what you're saying is this person has 7 years of training, and for the most part, their body isn't ready to do this training. If, on the other hand, you start the same kid at 5 and you build them up gradually and slowly, you can end up getting this child to reach levels beyond what they would have reached at 12 and be able to continue for a longer time. Instead of having just 7 years of training and that which steals their childhood, you would actually be able to maintain this longevity of training. Now, if we look at a lot of our masters, our masters in Okinawan Karate, we have a lot of teachers who started relatively young. And there's actually kind of funny, a lot of people say, oh, well, they started younger and this. I know a couple people who are considered, I've met a couple people who are considered legends in modern times. I won't say their names. Some of you can actually vouch for who these people are if you've talked to them. A lot of them will tell you that they did not start martial arts until they were 15 years old. And they started at 15 and continued their whole life. Now, there are a couple people who said, well, yes, I did start before that, but at 15 is when I started getting serious. And that's something that people actually have to look at. Think of the difference between starting something, a physical activity, when you're 6 versus starting it when you're 6, but taking it light, relaxing. And when you turn 15, then you start going hard. Think of the difference between a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old. A 15-year-old will get to adulthood in 3 years. Well, a 5-year-old, their body's still developing, and all these small injuries that we may not necessarily pay attention will end up damaging their body in the long run. It won't just be stealing their childhood now, but you'll steal their health when they're in their 20s. You'll start seeing a body that acts more like an aged body by the time they're 40. And so the thing is, when you watch these videos, people shouldn't say, "Oh, well, that's the way it was done in the past, so it's okay." No, we don't live in that world anymore. We know better now. We have science, we have rational thought, we have medicine. I mean, the life expectancy shows us this. You can actually see the life expectancy back a couple thousand years ago was 35. Now we're actually at 80, and you can see that with science, technology, understanding how the body works and how it functions, we do live longer. We are able to do things a little better. Now, as I say this, there were people in the past who actually did do these things as well. They just maybe didn't record them, but they did reach longevity. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I don't know if you agree with me, but like I said, if you look at the facts, China's population is a lot larger than the US's. They take their kids fresh out pretty much as soon as they show any promise and start putting them into programs. And yet, when we look at stuff like the Olympics, where yes, you are competing, you can see that these methods of beating children to compete at this adult level doesn't work. So with that, I'll sign off. If you disagree with me, please explain to me why. Show me some evidence to what you're saying. But remember, anything you say should be backed up by some sort of numbers. Now, I didn't use martial art numbers because, well, I'm not big on the competition martial arts, and I'm not going to go into that. The Olympics, you can actually see that training regimens for young kids, they're not the ones who are winning. Quite the contrary, it's the ones who actually do smart training that actually maintain it. So, I guess what I'm trying to tell you is if you're a teacher, you have an obligation. If you're a sensei, if you teach at all, you have an obligation, if you teach children, to make sure you know what exercises will damage joints so you don't do them. Know what exercise help healthy development so you can actually teach that. Know nutrition. You actually do, children especially, and actually children, adults, everyone really needs to be able to talk about how nutrition is. Now, that said, I will be the first one to say I know about nutrition, and I will explain to people what nutrition is, but I don't always follow it. So that's one of the reasons why you see me and I'm just like a big, heavy guy. But I can talk about it. So with that, I'll sign off, and I hope you enjoy this video. Hope you can make some comments, and if you enjoy it, please subscribe.